But so many times, just as social media, one of the disadvantages is many times people read into postings as a perfect life versus I wish we would post more of the process to the perceived perfect life, because there's none. The burn that comes to me to answer that question, Ben, is the burn to not quit. Success is the ability to bear pain, not be a pain. I wish I could tell you it's been 27 years of bliss. It's been great. Has not. I wish I can tell you raising the three girls and the son has been easy, has been great. There has been challenging times. And the biggest passion point, burn, right now that's coming to me to make sure anybody that's listening, before I go into any of the 55 interceptions, all those things, to be great in life, that God has called all of us to be great at something. There's a level of understanding that there's a burn to stay in it, to not quit, to understand that every part of it is a part of helping develop you to become the person you are supposed to be at each phase of your life.
I mean, we need to stay positive. It may sound cliche, but it's true. And when I say positive, I don't mean Pollyanna positive. This is not about seeing the world through rose-colored glasses. This is knowing that you have the power to overcome the thorns. We're not positive because life is easy. We're positive because life is hard. And so my big message right now is win today. Don't worry about the future. Just win each day. You got to show up and win today. Control what you control. Win today. Stay positive in this moment. If we win today, we win tomorrow, we win the next day, we will create a great future. But we cannot focus on what would have been, right? I was crushing 2020. I know you were as well. It was like January, February, early March. I mean, best year I've ever had.
Same here.
And then the world stopped. And then when that happened, I went towards the negative at first. I'm going to be honest, man. I went a little negative. As you know, I grew up in a Jewish Italian family, a lot of food, a lot of guilt. So I naturally go towards the negative. And I said, is this going to help me create my future? Is this attitude going to help me help others create their future? No. So I knew right then and there I had to find this eternal hope, this ray of optimism and belief. And I made a decision right there that I was going to be a light for others, that I was going to stay positive every single day. And I was going to just use this time to make a difference in the lives of others.
For me, I think for most people, when the source of their inspiration or their burn, I'm just going to hypothesize, it usually comes out of some challenge they went through, right? Something that was really difficult for them, right? And as you know from my book, I was in a refugee camp for 3 years as a kid in Sudan, had the opportunity to come to this country with my family, grew up outside of Chicago, learned English, went through the school system. And there was a really tough time I had then during my childhood where, and I didn't know it. Sometimes you don't know the pain you're feeling till later on, where I can look back and I realize I just thought so little of myself. I didn't have any confidence. I didn't look like the other kids. I was living in low-income housing. I'd come and if you would have said, "Hey, how valuable are you? How much significance do you have?" I would have said none. Like I don't offer much to the world, right? And I was blessed enough to have some mentors, Ben, who taught me a different way of viewing myself, who taught me that I could grow, who taught me that I could be a better student, who helped me build confidence, who helped me get better at developing relationships. All this eventually helped me get to that scholarship at Harvard that you mentioned. And when I looked at my life and I saw where I started from, having to flee a war in Ethiopia, coming to the States, and then getting to grow like this, but the burn that I felt then was wanting to help other people grow.
Talk. What's the mental state that you take yourself to say, I'm going to stay uncomfortable and I'm going to take action?
I hate wasting time, right? I hate being, people call it unproductive. I don't like backtracking. Like if I'm driving somewhere, I want to take the most direct route and I just want to get there. And if I make a wrong turn, I don't want to go back and retrace my steps. I want to go a different way. Like that's just kind of how I am, right? So when I think about after I've put a certain amount of time into something, unless it's something that for whatever reason I find out I have no passion in and I don't want to do, you know what I mean? Or it's a healthy thing to quit. That's a different scenario. But if it's simply like this is getting too hard. The odds are just too stacked against me. You know, all these excuses and reasons we give ourselves. I think about all the work I've already put into it and what I've done to get to that level. And I'm like, do I want to waste all that time though and just like start over on something else? If I still want to do this, I'm still passionate about this, but I'm like having my doubts, or I'm being told by a million people, you can't, you know, you won't. It's just, why don't you think about this? Why don't you think about that? I mean, I'm facing that right now. You know, I'm trying to work in film and television, and you know, we briefly mentioned it before this. I produced my first movie, you know, earlier this year, and I want to direct a movie, and I want to build a production company. I want to do all these things. And I got everybody in Hollywood telling me, well, you know, you should do this because it's a niche for you and it's a good fit for you. And, you know, and that takes time, that takes blah, blah, blah. It's all the type of people that aren't going to be relentless like I am. They don't understand how to drive through, how to push through, right? I've seen successes before in my life, little ones, big ones, whatever you want to call it, because I just didn't quit. I just kept going and something happened. A door opened. It wasn't the door I was expecting maybe, but it opened.
Well, the car was a stick shift car, and we didn't realize it. So my mom not only did not know how to drive, but on top of that, she now has to learn how to drive a stick shift. So, you know, if the road is like this, we're good. But if we're at a stop sign and the road is like this, we're bad. Because the clutch would have to, you know, would pop into gear and she'd start panicking. She's just a very nervous woman as it is. And so if you could imagine this, at 13 years old, I was driving my family around illegally, obviously. I think of my son. My son is 12 years old. There's no way in hell he'd be driving us around. But that's just what you have to do, you know? When you're faced with adversity, you got to make a decision as to how you're going to respond, like what you said. And I just remember responding like I knew how. I just instinctively got in the car and said, Mom, I got this. I learned how to drive, and sure enough, from 13 to 16, I was the guy that was driving the family around. There was no dad, so that wasn't an option. Mom couldn't drive, that wasn't an option. I was the oldest brother, I had to make it happen.
I think of you going to Coach Hedberg and you going to Coach Kleiman and saying, this is Carson's team. Let him start. And once again, for all of, whether it's a young athlete, whether it's somebody in business who's trying to make it all about them, help me understand. Because I still look back on that. It is so rare that somebody would do that, right? Because so many people would say, no, this is my team now. Yeah. Like, is this risk really okay? And so you make that decision. Tell us about that decision and the importance of being a great teammate in life.
And I think that's what I learned through the process is, you said, it's the relationships, and it's about understanding your role in the team. And as soon as I got to North Dakota State, that was the big thing, is like, everybody's got a role in this thing. It doesn't matter if, like you said, you're Carson Wentz and going to be an NFL quarterback, or you're a freshman walk-on that's just trying to figure out where the dining hall is. Like, everybody's got a role in this thing, and you just help pull people along, get behind the goal, get behind the message, and just help guys develop. And that's what Carson did with me. You know, I showed up and lived in his basement, you know, the summer before school started, and he really invested time in me, and we built a really good relationship. And I know I wouldn't have been ready to play in any of those games. I still don't know if I quite was, but I could at least hand the ball off and run around a little bit because of Carson and what he had invested in me.
I'd really love for you to speak to, and you already mentioned it with your mom, I always talk about the importance of environment. So you've created an environment where, like, you're kissing your mom on the way out the door to, like, remember what's important. Mm-hmm. So how important has environment been, not just for the mental side, like to remember your mom like that, but what are some of the things on the physical side, some of those disciplines that have put you in position to be this successful for this long at a position for a lot of guys, man, it wears down the body.
Yeah. I mean, you know, from the environmental side, you know, it's just having the right people around me, you know, people like, you know, you and people like Will Compton, who I talk to, you know, most of the time, and then kind of encourage each other. And then, you know, friends who I grew up with, you know, kind of separating those friends to where, you know, ones who want to push you and motivate you, and the ones who, you know, just want, you know, hang out and want to have fun and do certain things. And that's just, you know, having, you know, separating that type of environment, you know, for people who, you know, sometimes might not have the same dreams, may not have the same goals as you. Not that you don't have to be friends with them, but most of the time, you know, some of the stuff that you're involved in, you may not want to involve them in it because it may hold you back.
Yes, I experienced fear. There's a depression that tries to creep in and get you to quit. There is a million reasons why I should not have trained. Chemotherapy was hard. I was nauseous, losing weight, gaining weight, exhausted, weak. And I realized that it's not about the end. It's not about getting to the end right now, but it's about what steps can I take today to make sure that I could get to that point. And I think that when it comes to people and their goals, definitely with COVID-19, there's a lot of fear, a lot of uncertainty. There's a lot of stipulations on what you can and cannot do. And if you focus on what you can't do, you're not going to do anything. Regardless, the time is going to pass. Either, one way or another, this thing is going to eventually come to an end. And what we do with this time right now is going to determine our outcome or what our lives are going to look like in the future. And so for me, I feel like this is a cocoon moment where I'm taking advantage of this time here at the house. I'm not focusing on what I cannot do, but I'm looking and saying, why not me? What can I do now? And I feel like by doing that, there's a lot of people that are watching me and how I'm handling this real adversity that's so relatable that I feel like if they see me succeed in doing it, they'll know, okay, I can do it too. I'm not going to give up. COVID-19 is rough, but it's not going to stop me.
I was on the sidelines minding my own business, and all of a sudden my entire life blew up in my face. And I wasn't alone that day. It was my 26th birthday weekend, my first time ever even in the city of Boston. And I had brought my 5-year-old son with me, where one of our friends who had qualified to run, we were watching her. And so we had made our way to the 17-mile marker. And then one person in our group of about 9 people said, hey, let's go down to the finish line. And it just so happened that we were 3 feet away from the first bomb that went off. But Noah had gotten really bored. And this is what I want more people than, just anything to take away from my story is not the fact that I got blown up at the Boston Marathon, but my son was so bored that I set him down on my feet, and that way I could watch the runners pass. I knew where he was, and it happened to be in that spot that I was able to take all of the shrapnel in the back of my legs, torso, and left hand, and that's what shielded my little boy from not being here now. So as we're talking and having this conversation, my son Noah, who was 5 at the time, is now going to be 13 on Sunday. And it's just so amazing to know that he's still with us. And so irregardless of everything that happened to me and the journey that I would have to embark on, my son was okay from that. And so I knew that I had to be okay too.
Regarding the burn, you mentioned it, Google, Ben, as you know, it only tells part of the story. Right? You can Google someone, see they work for this organization, they've done X, Y, or Z, but Google only tells part of the story. So today I work with these networks. I'm a speaker, I'm a coach, got books coming out, etc. But Google will never tell you that I'm from a small town in Michigan. One of those towns people don't leave. Google will never tell you that I'm from a blue-collar background. My dad's worked in factories his whole life. My mother was an administrative assistant for the same organization for over 30 years. Google would never tell you that, before I graduated from high school, I moved over 15 different times in this small hometown. It will never tell you that between my mother and father are 6 divorces total. It will never tell you that I know what it's like to live in a shelter for battered and abused women and children. I don't share that information with you to make you feel sorry for me. I share that with you because Google will never tell you the whole story about the folks that you meet in this life. And when you talk about burn coming up and with that instability that I experienced, somehow, some way, being the youngest of 3 kids, I always knew there had to be another way.
What is it? What were those daily disciplines? What was that driver? What was that burn that caused Paul Foster, who's actually a character in Leave Your Legacy, Paul Foster, former basketball player. For those of you that have read Leave Your Legacy, what is it that drove you to do what it takes to become a Division I basketball player?
I have a dad who's incredible, and he was there to push me. As I got older, though, it was the tunnel vision of every day was a battle. And so I had a thought pattern, which I look back and it was wrong, but it actually got me to a Division I basketball scholarship, but it was to shoot 1,000 jump shots a day. Now, I should have just made 500 a day instead of shooting 1,000 because I was probably doing it wrong. But it was the daily grind. We were laughing this past Christmas that I literally would take one day off a year, and it would be Christmas Day usually. So I'd shoot 1,000 shots a day, and then I turned 17.
So hold on. So
yeah.
math here.
Yeah.
That's 364,000 jump shots in a year.
Yes. I should have just made about 150, 200,000. That'd have been better. But no, it was never about the end goal. It was about the process and enjoying the grind and how to get there. And I think that's kind of translated over into business for me. So it's been a huge deal to just enjoy the journey and not worry about the goals of the business. And it was the same thing with basketball.
Arena, you welcoming others. What does legacy mean to you?
We have to leave things better than we found them. I truly believe that. I'm working exceptionally hard on myself. I'm engaged in servant leadership. I think that is the most perfect description of, my mantra and what I want to strive to do each and every day. The more that we do for others, that's legacy, right? Nobody's going to remember, or very often they won't remember certain accolades or trophies or things that they acquired over time. What they are going to remember is how you made them feel in your time together. They're going to remember that time that you picked them up and dusted them off. They're going to remember that time that you pushed them a little bit further and pulled them along and helped them. And when I think of legacy, I think of people that mean the most to me in my life and have the biggest impact to me in my life. That's what legacy means to me. And servant leadership, I think, it runs parallel with legacy. I mean, the greatest servant leaders of our time have legacy. The greatest servant leaders of our time are the ones that are remembered well beyond their time with us. So when I think of legacy, I think of servant leadership and what are the things that I need to do to embody that.
In the energy and the construction business, it was really cool to realize that, hey, I'm now identifying people that have a ton of potential that may not recognize it, and they may have a ton of talent and they don't really realize it, and how do you really bring that out of them and get them to advance to the next level? So when you talk about what fires me up, that's just one of the huge things, to be able to help somebody advance and be successful. Even if they may surpass you, it's just an amazing feeling to realize that people can reach their max potential with your help. So I don't think there's any better influence you can have on somebody than to really try and bring out that potential, bring out that talent, and help them realize it so that they can be successful in their career and their personal life. And that is forever what really fires me up and is my burn day in and day out.
Right. I mean, I got fired from a really great opportunity, and it was because of a really careless decision over a test. And I can't get it back. It didn't hurt anybody. It wasn't intentional. It was just something simple that I did. But in the industry that I was in, those things can't happen, right? So that's the story. And for me, the first part of dealing with the pain is just own it. So many people try to make excuses or mask something that they did. It's like, well, it didn't really happen, or it wasn't that bad. It's like, no, it sucked. It was really freaking hard. It was horrible. And it was painful as hell.
That's so true.
And it's like, just call it what it is and then be okay with it. And you're over something, or you're close to being over it when you can talk about it in a way that doesn't affect your current identity. And I'm there, right? Like, I can talk about this in a way that doesn't affect my current identity because I've gotten over it and I've had to pray through it and get counsel from people like you and others. But at the end of the day, that's what happened. And I was broken. And being broken is a really powerful position.
Your character is manifested when your values, your principles, your morals, and your standards are tested. Again, your character is manifested when your values, your principles, your morals, and your standards are tested. And your tests are basically the temptations and the opportunities that present themselves. Your character will be tested under tremendous pressure. But in most cases, you don't believe what you believe until it is truly tested. So think about it. People say, I have character, I have integrity. Well, do you? You will find out you have both when it's tested. And I think that is the most important thing. So now I say to our players, and I say to parents that have children, one of the things that you want to do in all cases, you want the umbrella. So when kids are at home, when it's rain, it's storm, and it's tough weather, well, what happens is parents need to allow their children to go through tough times under their parents' umbrella at home. Whatever they got with the coach, if it's going tough times with the high school coach, whatever it is, I'm not talking about violence, but coach treating them tough, they got to earn it. Let them go through it at home. Let them go through it. Because the last thing you want to do as a parent to allow your child to go through tough times and they're not under your umbrella. I think that is a hard thing to deal with for parents.
How has that burn showed up in getting to, because everybody wants to go play in the league, but they don't realize you better find that internal fuel and put in that work.
You know, for me, it's funny. I used to be able to go to my brother's football games before I was legally able to play football in Pop Warner. And I remember being on the sideline with my dad. I just couldn't wait to get out there. He's like, no, you got to wait your turn. You got to wait your turn. And I'm like, man, I can play. And then it wasn't until 9 when I was able to play. And, you know, he was gone by then. But, you know, from that moment on, and when I started playing football, a lot of the memories of me being on the sideline with him racing across the street to the garage was like, okay, I always want to play, but now it's a different meaning. The love of the game became even deeper because those memories that I have with my father was a lot that had to do around sports. And like you said, now it's that day-to-day process when you don't want to wake up as a kid, when you don't want to go do this or you want to go work out. There was a greater purpose there. And I felt like if I quit, I wasn't quitting on myself, but I was letting my mom down, my family down, and disappointing him because I know if he was here, it wouldn't be that way. So, yeah.
Guys out there that can go punt a football, I mean, it's like golf. If you stop playing for a while, when you come back to it, like you're gonna have to refine it. You're gonna have to bring back that muscle memory and stuff like that. So, punting and kicking, it's all about repeatability. Like if you can repeat the same motion over and over again and hit good kicks and good punts while people are running at you, while teams are trying to block your kicks and stuff like that in pressure situations, that's what sets you apart.
I'd agree with that too. I think to add to that, I think there's about 100 guys out there that are good enough to kick in the NFL. I think they have the ability to kick and punt, but when they get the chance, I think they're just not in the right headspace. And so, you know, I think a lot of people lose the battle before it even starts. I think it just starts with confidence. Yeah, if you believe that you're going to hit these 55, 60-yard punts, and I believe I'm going to hit these, I'm going to make this kick, you know, I'll make this next kick. I think that's where we win the battle before it even starts.
You know, what I don't want to do is take my talent and put it in the ground and it never grows. And I don't want to turn it into 3. I want to grow it to 10, to 100, to 1,000. So, you know, the burn for me, my biggest fear is I show up at God's doorstep and he's like, hey, I gave you 10, you turned it into 20, and you should have turned it into 100. You know, so for me it is, I know we've been blessed and I know we have a lot, but with a lot, you know, a lot is expected.
The first thing is every great performer has a chip on their shoulder or a spark that drives them that is personal to them. Michael Jordan, if everybody's watching this, you're going to watch this brilliant documentary, but go back and watch Michael Jordan's Hall of Fame induction speech. People thought he was a total jerk, and he was actually panned in the media for the way that he did it. And it was completely off the cuff because he said he didn't want to say anything. He just wanted to come up and say thank you and walk off the stage. But then he wanted to talk. And what he did is he gave us an insight into his soul. His soul was the fact that he always used in his heart and soul that somebody was disrespecting him or doubting him. And he would create scenarios against competitors. Early in his rookie season, Sidney Moncrief is the best defender in the game. And he knows that. And so he says, he doubts me. And my team has quit on me. See, he was creating schemas or things in his mind that motivated him. Okay, Kobe Bryant used the fact that other people couldn't work as hard as he could. But I wasn't as talented, he would say. But then he would say, I would overwork them. Tom Brady still to this day holds his draft card and still puts it out on social media. So everybody has to find what their spark is.
Do you think you can automate relationships? And they're like, well, no. And I'm like, well, if you don't put a handwritten note with every single gift that goes out, or you don't let our team write all the notes for you, when somebody receives a package and feels like it just was one of 10,000, nobody feels special. They feel like, oh, it's just a number. And so what they don't realize is when they're doing book launches or they're doing product launches or brand launches, like the little things like a handwritten note mean more than just what you're sending. And so they'll say, John, I did giftology, it didn't work. And I'm like, oh, did you follow the recipe? And they're like, well, kinda. I did giftology-ish. And I'm like, well, imagine baking bread. And you decide, you know what, I'm not going to put yeast in the bread today. Are you going to get bread? And they're like, no. And I'm like, well, if you don't follow the steps and make it personalized. If you don't include their family and inner circle, if you don't put a handwritten note with it, if you send it at obligatory times like Christmas and birthdays, like I call it no ABC gifting, a gift has to show up as a surprise. Otherwise, you're just doing an expected transactional type thing. And so people are like, you mean there's a lot of thought and strategy to this gifting thing? I'm like, you probably have a financial plan, you have a marketing plan, you have a health plan, you have a diet, all these other things. What's your relationship plan for your most valuable relationships that allow you to have a business? I don't care if you have $1 million business or a $20 billion business. If you don't have a plan for the people who make your business tick, then guess what? Somebody else is going to steal them away with their thoughtfulness and their actions. Like people are like, oh, I feel gratitude. I'm like, I don't care what you feel. Gratitude is an action.
Well, I think it's easy for us to get caught up in what our intentions are. Right? So we have all these great intentions of doing all these things, whether it's in business, with our kids, with our spouse, but do we really transfer what we think we should do and we know we should do actually into doing it? Right? And that comes down into every philosophy, even for health, and why I'm in the health and fitness business is because most people have these great intentions, but they don't really ever take the action. And your intentions don't determine your standards. Those are just thoughts, right? Or they're words that we say, but they're not actually what we do. So at the end of the day, what we do is really what defines our standards.
Well, so my message to companies and organizations is about grit. And grit is what it took for me to overcome the adversity that I faced. Because I realized early on when I was in the hospital bed and I couldn't walk, I realized if I wanted to, I recognized where I was and I saw where I wanted to go. But then I just had to figure out how I was going to get there, right? We start with where we are, we see where we want to go, but then we got to figure out how we're going to get there, of course, right? And so I think that, on the road to overcoming anything, what worked for me was to work with grit, to live with grit, really. And a lot of people have talked about grit. It seems like a pretty good idea for people and organizations to possess, but to me, it's been said that it's working for the long-term goal. It's about being persistent, and that's all true. I agree with that. But I believe that grit's, there's 4 key components to it. And it starts by working first and foremost, and probably most importantly, to answer your question, the message that I would give to people, if I could just say one thing to them, I would like to say all 5 things with grit. The purpose drives grit. Knowing our why, having a greater working for something bigger than ourselves, that drives grit. That's what I would say. I think it's so important to work for something bigger than ourselves, because if we're working just for ourselves, any one of us in any organization on the planet, if we're working just for ourselves, I think it's pretty likely, it's actually almost inevitable that we're going to hit some form of adversity, opposition, challenge, trial, tribulation, what have you, that'll probably cause us to give up because we don't have a driving force for why we do what we do.
Yeah, in everything I do in business, in finance, in speaking, there's always adversity. There's always someone who thinks that you can't do it. There's always, that next challenge or roadblock ahead of you. And what you really need to learn is that you need to tune out the judgment of others and understand that your opinion is the only one that you need to value. I respect everyone's opinion. Everyone has a phenomenal opinion and a phenomenal point of view. But the only person's opinion that I value and truly value is my own. Because the only person's values and opinions of myself that matter are me. If I talk to someone and they don't want to work with me, if I talk to someone and they, don't like what I'm doing for some reason, that's okay. That's their opinion. And I respect that, but I don't have to value that. And because I have that mindset and that opinion of myself, I have the confidence that the next opportunity will come, and what happens in the past doesn't matter.
My first connection to you, Ben, was by reading Continued Fight when I was diagnosed with cancer. I was an intern at Northwestern Mutual, and Kelsey Motley, my recruiter, gave me the book to read while I literally was fighting the good fight. And so you have no idea, and I have no idea, the impact that we've had, because a lot of times those stories go untold. But, if we continue to step in the box, we can continue to transform ourselves. And so whether it's, overcoming the fact that, not everyone can relate to a cancer diagnosis, but many people have lost parents. Many people have found themselves in a place where they're heavier than they want to be. And so it starts with a mindset change, which results in a change in activity and action. And so when we can start to change those behaviors, ultimately we can become whoever we want to become. We just have to, to go back to where we started, shed that statistic of who we believe we once were, because that's going to continue to hold us back. Much like, you know, the old videos with the prisoner and the ball hanging on their leg, that's going to continue to weigh you down and hold you back because you're still hanging on to that identity of who you once were.
You're always most powerfully positioned to serve the person you once were. You're always most powerfully positioned to serve the person you once were. So one of the big hints, you know, we take people through this process called the brand DNA helix. It's these 6 questions that we ask them. And one of the questions we have is this whole area around, where do you have actual results? In other words, what have you actually lived? What have you achieved? And also, what has been your biggest pain? What has been your biggest heartbreak? What has been your biggest obstacle? Because whatever you have overcome, I guarantee you someone else is overcoming it right now. Somebody else is hurting. Somebody else is struggling. And you can help and speak to that person powerfully because you've been there and you've been through it. And that is a great opportunity, again, to not only serve and help, but, you know, create value and income and purpose, you know, profit and purpose in your life.
Or anything physical or the game of football, it started mentally. Like, football was like kind of my way out, in my opinion. You know, not saying that I wouldn't have tried to, you know, pursue other things, but that was what I enjoyed doing. That's how I wanted to feed my family. So I almost went into like almost a depression. Like after my junior year, it was like I haven't played any meaningful snaps until now. You know, until my senior year. So it's like, all right, how am I gonna get to the NFL with 1 year left? So I was like, something's got to give, and I couldn't blame it on the coaches anymore. It obviously had to do with me. So I just changed my mentality. You know, I just started putting the blame on myself and how I was approaching the game. I started envisioning what I wanted instead of what I wasn't doing. You know.
Yeah.
So yeah, like I told you, I was using the law of attraction. That was to see how that actually worked, and then paying off where it is now is like, if anybody asked my advice, like I would give them that advice. Like everything is unfolding how I envisioned, and I'm not just blowing smoke. Like that's the truth. Like I envisioned it. I woke up every day, I saw it on the board, I practiced it, and it came to life. So
trying to figure out what went wrong, where did I, you know what I'm saying, where did I have weaknesses at the game, to maybe what everybody else saw, what the coaches saw, like to a reason why, as if they didn't pick me. So, you know, I was writing that stuff down, and you know, I was asking myself, you know, what more do I need to give? And my answer to that question was, there's always more to give. You know, there's always something more to improve on. There's always things you can get better at. And that's, you know, that's always been my main focus. You know, I think a lot of people, they kind of always get to that point where they think that, you know, they're doing so much and they're providing so much that they start asking themselves, oh, what more can I do? I've done everything. But my answer to that question is there's always more that you can do. Like, that's just how I feel. That's my mindset. So every time that I go out here and work, every time that I go out on the field, every time I go out in the weight room, every time I go to rehab, you know, I try to get 1% better each and every day. That's always been my goal. You see me practice Alabama, and every practice, like, my goal is to make sure that I get better every day and to make my teammates better every day, so we can be a successful team.
I lost my mother at 38 years old. I know your father, Aaron, passed from heart failure at age 39. I mean, that's so young for both of us.
Yeah.
How has your father remained with you, and that burn inside of you, or that drive? How much of that is your father? How much of it is family? How much of it is now Aiden, your little man, right? So what is it that drives you? Talk about maybe your dad and the burn and what fuels you to overcome challenge, overcome adversity and injuries, to put yourself in this position.
Yeah, it's like all of that stuff into one pot, and it's just like
You know, I got all of these things around me that, you know, I've been through and, you know, adversity I have faced. And it's just all like built up inside me to where, you know, I can use it to my ability to where, you know, if I feel like quitting or, you know, I feel like giving up, you know, I just can think about that stuff and it just goes away. And it's like, I was never tired or I was never hurting. I was just thinking I was hurting, but I really wasn't hurting. When you see yourself, like when you put your son right there, okay, you tired, you're hurt. You have a son, you think about your son, it's like you shake back because, you know, that's your whole responsibility. That's your whole, you know, that's you. Basically, he's looking up to you. He's a part of you. You created him. So it's like everything I do, he's going to watch. Everything that, how I act, how I talk. He puts his hood on now because I always got my hood on. He's always hood. So it's just like everything I do, he sees. So, you know, I want to see him, want him to be proud. Like,
don't take anything for granted. You know, always, if you're going to do it, give it 110% in everything you do, no matter what it is. It don't have to be, you know, sports related. It don't have to be your job. It don't have to be, you know, your work at your job or anything. As long as you're doing it 110% and you don't have, you know, you don't leave nothing in the tank, then, you know, that's one of the life lessons I learned while at Bama, spending the 4 years there. If you do everything, you know, 110% and you feel good about it, then, hey, you can live on with your stuff. But, you know, if not, then you have to look at yourself in the mirror every night or every morning and, you know, live with that.
I refer to that getting drafted in the 5th round, knowing you were first-round talent. Man, that's a chip on your shoulder. Right. So you take that passion for God and your family and that chip on your shoulder. How do you actually use that, like when you're out on the field? Or is that something you think about before you head into a game? How do you use that to fuel you?
You know, just preparing for games, you know, as I watch film, as I break down, you know, the opponent that we're about to face that week, you know, I just, like I said, I constantly remind myself of who I am, you know, and I know, you know, when I step on the field, you know, my mindset is, you know, I'm the baddest dude out here, you know, and I gotta play like that. So it's like, you know, I compete with myself, you know, even when I get tired, even when I'm fatigued, you know, I just try my best to just keep pushing because, you know, that'll help and affect me, you know, on Sundays, and I'll be able to push through and fight, you know, for 4 quarters on Sundays. So it's just my mindset, you know. I feel like it's just different, you know, and as I got older, as I matured, you know, as I got to the NFL, it really clicked for me, you know. Every day I just try my best to do something different.